Before we start the official business this evening, I would like to invite you all to take part in a 2-minute silence to reflect on the life and legacy of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Thank you. Please sit down. I would now like to invite the elected mayor to say a few words.
Thank you, Chairman. We were, of course, deeply saddened to hear of the passing of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. For 70 years, she has dedicated her life to the service of the country and the Commonwealth. She has been a figurehead of national unity and stability, particularly at times of crisis and change. Known for her words of wisdom and humanity, Queen Elizabeth led at all times with quiet determination, devotion, and selflessness. She was a shining example of how to live life, carry out duties for the good of others. She was an inspiration to all and will be greatly missed, but never forgotten. She was indeed a truly remarkable lady. May she rest in peace. I would also like to take this opportunity on behalf of North Tyneside Council to wish His Majesty King Charles III a long and happy reign. God save the King.
Thank you, Mayor Redfern. All right. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Councillor Linda Rowley, she's unfortunately got COVID again.
Thank you. And give her our best wishes. I've received apologies from Councillor Muriel Green, Rebecca O'Keefe and Erin Parker Leonard. Councillor John O'Shea will be late. He is coming, but he will be late. Well, you could have waved at me. Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Can I remind members, if they have any registrable and or non-registrable interests in matters appearing on the agenda, and the nature of the interest, they must verbally declare in respect of any items of business to be discussed at this meeting and the nature of such interests. You are also invited to disclose any dispensation from the requirement to declare any registrable and or non-registrable interests that have been granted to you in respect of any matters appearing on the agenda. Those members should also complete the card and return it in the receptacle located on the desk of the Democratic Services Officer before leaving. Councillor Bell? Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Motion 2, the antisocial behaviour. I work in the criminal justice system and I work closely with the PCC's office, and I think that may get a political debate, so I'll just not speak and I won't vote.
Thank you, Chair. Motion 1, I have a registrable interest. I am a member of the North East Joint Transport Committee and the North East Joint Transport Committee at Tyne and Wear Subcommittee. I have a dispensation granted through the Council.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Thank you, Chairman. And I too am a member of the North of Tyne Combined Authority as a substitute member, and I have this dispensation as well. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Item 3.
Chair, I too am a substitute member for the North of Tyne Combined Authority and the North East Combined Authority Joint Transport Committee, and I do have a dispensation. Thank you.
I'm a member of the Joint Transport Committee.
Held on the 21st of July 2022. Can I ask the Council to confirm the minutes? Thank you. Item 4, motions. Motion 1, can I invite Councillor Bartoli to move the motion?
Thank you, Chair. Can I move the motion and reserve the right to speak?
Councillor Johnson, Chris Johnson, do you wish to second the motion?
Yes, please, Chair, and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Johnson?
I'd like to move amendment, Chair. I've circulated Democratic Services.
Do you have a seconder for the amendment? Thank you, Councillor Burden. Councillor Johnson?
Thank you, Chair. The Labour Group know tackling antisocial behaviour on both the Metro and the wider borough is a priority for our residents. It's why we've placed extra resources in the community protection team, why as Chair of the Tyne and Wear Subcommittee, I pushed for and ensured Nexus kept additional security team in the Metro and created a multi-agency antisocial behaviour task force. As part of the task force, we have Operation Coast Watch running this summer, which has seen a large presence of council staff, police and Nexus security and other staff both at stations and the wider coast. We know we have more work to do. We're starting off in a difficult environment, as all three organisations involved in Operation Coast Watch have over £400 million worth of funding cut from their total since the Conservative government came into power in 2010. I do absolutely agree with the premise of the motion, though. We need to do more to tackle ASB, and I do think part of that could be ticket barriers, and not just colour codes and time out, but beyond. You have to remember the situation Nexus finds itself in, however. The Conservative government cuts have left Nexus with £53 million less than the same government originally agreed for the capital grant to Nexus. This is where the exact funding stream where barriers would come from. The government must provide funding to Nexus to allow it to make improvements to its network. Let's write the Nexus in the government and ask the government to restore funding to Nexus and allow it to make improvements to our gate lines at metro stations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Bartoli, would you like to exercise the right of reply?
Chair, I wonder, obviously this is the first time we've seen this, and it does make a number of claims, which I think, if it would be okay, could we have a small recess to discuss the motion and the implications, because this has been dropped on us literally this second, and we don't...
5 minutes.
Thank you.
5 minutes. Have you got a copy?
Can I have some silence, please? Councillor Bartoli, would you like to exercise the right of reply now?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for giving us the time. It just gives us the opportunity to discuss it as a group. I don't think this was a motion that needed an amendment. the idea of adding in a bit of government bashing seemed to do nothing but politicise what I think was a sensible motion, which most of us could have agreed. It's sad when we have to politicise these things, but we are where we are, so we won't be supporting the amendment.
Last bit.
We won't be supporting the amendment, Chair.
Anyone else like to speak in favour of the amendment? We'll go to the vote then. All those in favour? Thank you. That was 4. And how many against was it? Those against the motion?
Against the amendment, Chair.
Against the amendment, sorry. 8. Did the amendment is now changed into substantive motion? Would anyone like to debate that? Councillor Burgess?
Thank you, Chair. I fully understand the motion and agree in part that the barriers may help in the reduction of antisocial behaviour coming from the metro system, and that Nexus staff on the stations would be a great idea and would possibly deter those that are travelling to the coast to cause trouble. However, to fully realise what is required to install barriers, we really need to have the support of this amendment, which we haven't just declared that we haven't got that support, without additional money from central government. Nexus would be hard-pressed to fund the installation. We all know that Nexus Capital Renewal Programme budget has been cut. So if the government is still serious about levelling up, they should provide the funds to support the installation of barriers. The underground system in London has barriers, and they are good enough for the capital. I can say no reason why they are not good enough for North Tyneside. I support the amendment and ask that the government funds the additional capital to put barriers into these 2 stations that have been named. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Councillor Bartoli? Thank
you, Chair. I was hoping this wasn't going to be a contentious motion, and I think at this point it'll probably pass through. And I do accept that it's not within the gift of the Council or the Mayor to make the final decision on this, and there may be both legal and financial implications, which will come back to Council or Cabinet, I'm sure, for us to view again. But just on a personal note, just this summer my son returned home with his sweatshirt soaked in blood because he'd stopped to assist and stem the bleeding of a teenage girl with knife wounds on Tynemouth metro station. And this summer, a few examples of what residents of Tynemouth and Cullercoats have seen have included the metro being stopped due to serious youth disturbance at Tynemouth, the co-op being ransacked, the staff attacked by groups of youths, a knife attack on Tynemouth seafront, a teenager being chased into the sea at Cullercoats by another youth with a knife, Nexus staff attacked at Tynemouth station, an acid attack on Tynemouth seafront, and a youth in Cullercoats having his cheekbone broken in an unprovoked attack. And I think we all fully commend the Council's part in Operation Coastwatch, which has certainly helped. However, I think we need to go further to protect our residents, and barriers would allow Council staff, police and Nexus to monitor, control and in some cases prevent those young people intent on causing trouble from visiting our coast. We don't propose that these barriers would be manned permanently, and we would suggest keeping them open for commuters and school children, but activating and or manning them at strategic times we believe would act as a deterrent and assist in keeping our coastline safer. Thank you.
Councillor Bartoli. Anyone else? Councillor Samuels.
Thank you, Chair. I will be supporting the motion as amended. I obviously support the erection of staff ticket barriers at all metro stations, but in particular, particularly at colour codes, is the word I represent. But it will require government funding, hence the need for the amendment. Colour codes is effectively the main access point route to the beach and has been a point of friction on the warmest days when large numbers come to the coast. Most are welcome and support the growing economy, but a minority has been said come to cause trouble. I just wanted to draw the attention. A lot of work has been done in that area with our community protection teams, working with police and our cleaning teams, which the motion, unfortunately, as the original motion failed to mention. Particularly worth a mention are the efforts of the Colour Coats Collective and the Totally Tynemouth Collective in Tynemouth. I speak more for the Colour Coats Collective, with whom I've worked fairly closely. We've got a network of local people spotting trouble when it starts and letting the police and community support know when things happen. They've been provided with contact numbers to help them get the message across. The police and the authorities and community support team can't be everywhere, but the idea of having the community having their eyes and ears there has been immensely helpful. In terms of mess on the beach, which the original motion mentioned, the collective has set about trash mobs of local people who come out at short notice and help clean out the mess on the beach at the end of the day and to help sort things out. The efforts of the collective have seen a level of positivity in tackling these issues, and it's a great disappointment to me that it appears I'm the only Colour Coats councillor to engage with the collective in making the area better. And I would genuinely ask that other councillors engage with these collectives in terms of actually getting the community involved in sorting out these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Samuels. Councillor Barry?
I will be supporting the motion because I agree that there's been a rapid increase in antisocial behaviour in and around Colour Coats Harbour and Bay, because they're coming directly from the metro station down onto the beach with cans, bottles and unfortunately weapons as well. They make the life of the local residents around there hell. They're swearing, they're graffitiing, they're urinating all over the place, they're fighting, and as we said, there was a knife attack on the beach whilst children and families were there, which was not very nice. I believe that it will act as a deterrent. It won't solve the problem, but it will go in the right direction. And I have to commend the police as well, because their plan is working. We are reducing it, but we've got a long way to go.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. Councillor Thurloway?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bartoli complains that this substantive motion is political. When central government cuts public services and public funding, those decisions are political. You can't have it both ways.
Councillor Thurlow. Councillor Chris Johnson?
Thank you, Chair. I just come from a slightly different angle, actually. We've worked a long time with North Shields neighbourhood policing team, and they are very, very supportive of this particular initiative. One individual worked in London, and he's quite amazed at the open access to platforms that we have here, so that they're very keen. The other thing that struck me was, though, as to what abuse he and security on the metro suffer. It's horrifying to listen to the sorts of things, the abuse that they have to put up with from young people on the metro. And I think this initiative is really important because it serves to support, shows our support for members of the emergency services. I think that's really, really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Anyone else? Councillor Johnson? Carl Johnson this time. Would you like to exercise the right of reply?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on Councillor Felway's point, I think he's absolutely right. The legacy of antisocial behaviour across this borough is 12 years' worth of government cuts, not just to budgets, but to policing, which has led to loss of youth work, loss of community facilities, lots of things for people to do. It is a damning indictment of 12 years as Tory government. We need barriers on not just these stations, but the rest of the borough as well. Neither of these two stations are the highest, have the most antisocial behaviour of any metro stations. Falling Ends has more antisocial behaviour than any other metro station in our borough. They should absolutely have barriers at that station as well to prevent the exact same thing from happening. Nexus got a budget from the central government, Tory government. 2 years later, the Tory government telling Nexus actually it's going to be £48 million less over 4 years. That means Nexus can't invest in things, infrastructure and things like this. it means next have to invite in vital things. You've all seen the line closer recently from Longbenton along to the coastway. That's because that is failing infrastructure because the government didn't invest enough money in Nexus infrastructure. You know, if they put the budget to just the level they said it would be, then we could do things like this. We could invest more in ticket barriers. Because ultimately, ticket barriers increase fare revenue as well. That allows that to be reinvested back into the metro. You've seen in London the fare revenue increase with ticket barriers being put in place. This motion, as amended, is absolutely fine. It's not a political shot at the government. Political decisions matter and they make a difference, and that's why we've proposed this amendment. But we absolutely agree with the premise of the barriers, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. We'll now go to the vote on the substantive motion. All those in favour? That looks unanimous to me, unless I'm mistaken. "54 votes for the motion and no votes against, so the motion is carried. Thank you. We now move on to motion 2. Can I invite Councillor Scargill to move the motion, please?
Thank you, Chair. I was elected to sort out antisocial behaviour in Collingwood Ward after a decade of neglect by 3 complacent Labour councillors. But Kim McGuinness, our Police Crime Commissioner, seems to be making that as difficult for me as she can. We've tried to make contact with her several times to arrange a meeting, and this is what we've had back. In May 2021, we sent her a Twitter message as well as an email. In July 2021, responding to criticism that she hadn't replied to us, Kim said to the Chronicle that she wasn't ignoring us, but a date hadn't been fixed. That's over a year ago. A date still hasn't been fixed. In April 2022, we sent her another email. That's before I was a councillor. In May 2022, after I was elected, we sent a follow-up email pleading that she would meet me now that I had been elected. We didn't get any reply to that, despite me mentioning how distressed some residents were at the state of the area. Fortunately, Kim does manage to make time to come to Collingwood Ward to campaign for Labour, presumably telling everyone what a good job she's been doing. Well, this is the kind of thing my residents are now having to put up with. This young lad fell over at Hilltop Park. I begged Kim to come to Hilltop Park so I could show her the devastating effects of antisocial behaviour, but I haven't had an answer from her. We've already heard tonight how bad antisocial behaviour in North Tyneside is. This motion asks for adequate communication from the PCC to the councillors so we can do our job properly and help make North Tyneside a safer place for everyone. I hope I can rely on support from across the chamber. And what I'd say to Kim is that if all you're interested in is winning elections and keeping your £86,000 salary, rather than actually tackling antisocial behaviour in North Tyneside, then you should do the decent thing and resign. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bones, do you wish to second the motion?
Yeah, I reserve the right to speak, Chair.
Thank you. I'll now invite members to speak to the motion. Councillor Johnson?
I've got an amendment, Chair. It's been circulated to the Democratic Services team. Hopefully not a 5-minute recess for this one.
Do you have a seconder for your amendment? There are hard copies available if members would like to see them, yeah? Have we all had time to read this?
No. Chair, could we have 5 minutes outside to read this, please?
No, I'm not continuing this. We've got it in front of you. I will give you 1 more minute to read it. By the time we get out, it'll be a minute.
Chair, that's a minute.
Right. I'll now invite members to speak to the amendment. Councillor Johnson?
Thank you, Chair. The amendment, the real basis of the amendment, until I heard the absolutely ridiculous personal attack on the Police and Crime Commissioner from the opposition as opposed to focusing on the real issue, which is antisocial behaviour.
Can I just interrupt for 1 moment? I will not tolerate personal attacks on people who are not present.
I think it absolutely pays to the opposition not quite understanding how policing works as well. You'll note the first line, ask the PCC to fully review and evaluate police numbers on the North Tyneside. Anyone that knows how policing works knows that the Police and Crime Commissioner is operationally independent. The Police and Crime Commissioner cannot review police numbers. It is down to the Chief Constable to do that. I'm happy to ask the Chief Constable to review police numbers in North Tyneside. I'll always take more police in North Tyneside, but it's the naivety of the councillors proposing the motion, Chair. The motion is again blind at the reality of 12 years of Tory government cuts. 1,100 frontline police officers gone, 148 million from their budget. And it's blind to the work already going on in North Tyneside. Right across the Northumbria Force region, the Police and Crime Commissioner set up her antisocial behaviour panel on a wider basis, a multi-agency panel aimed at tackling antisocial behaviour across the patch, already forming results. Their own government has given funding to the Police and Crime Commissioner for various initiatives because she's at the forefront of tackling those initiatives, whether it be safety of women and girls, safety on nights out, safety on the Metro, the Project Vita, the Violence Reduction Unit. Those are all things the Tory government has funded the Northumbria Police and Crime Commissioner to do because she is a lead on police and crimes nationally on that. It also fails to undermine the good work of what we've done locally. Massive investment in our community protection team to be out right across the borough looking at antisocial behaviour. The North Tyneside Antisocial Behaviour Board, which was formed recently, which is cross-party, Councillor Westwater sits on it as a representative as well as councillors from our side sitting on it, which I chair. That is a multi-agency task force that goes across the borough that's already seen results towards forming antisocial behaviour. I'm happy to invite the Police and Commissioner and the Chief Constable to this council to answer questions. They absolutely should be able to be held accountable, but that's both their jobs. I'm not going to agree to, and I'm going to move them. I'm not going to ask the PCC to go to the Conservative group. If they want to invite the Conservative group, they can. Feel free, feel free to do it again. Also, I'm not going to allow the Conservative group to abolish as if the 12 years of Tory government haven't happened, and it's not the 1,100 officers cut and the 148 million cut that has seen policing fall in this borough, that has seen a rise to antisocial behaviour. The amendment will continue to request the PCC works closely. The Police and Crime Commissioner is on the Antisocial Behaviour Board. The Police and Crime Commissioner attends the Antisocial Behaviour Board and gives information at that board. I can't answer the Police and Crime Commissioner what's happened, but there was a disgraceful personal attack. This amendment aims to actually tackle antisocial behaviour in this borough, put things in place to continue to tackle antisocial behaviour, as opposed to the ridiculous personal attack from the Conservative Party, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Burgess, did you want to speak?
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Whilst I support the gist of this motion, the original motion that came forward, I cannot support any personal attack. I mean, this is about antisocial behaviour, and it should not be geared at the personal attacks on the PCC. I believe the motion actually fails, and it's not the positive actions that have been made in North Tyneside to deal with antisocial behaviour and the measures that need to be taken to support the police and increase the police numbers in North Tyneside. That is why we bring this amendment to the motion, which I believe all in the Chamber will support. In our North Tyneside plan 2021 to 2025, a theme of secure North Tyneside promotes working with Northumbria Police to tackle antisocial behaviour. To that end, we have approved public space orders relating to dog control and alcohol consumption in public. We have also endorsed a 5-year community safety strategy with 4 priority areas: public protection, alcohol and drugs, safeguarding and crime and disorder. We have further established an antisocial behaviour task force. This has had a cross-party support that includes a range of partners such as Northumbria Police, Nexus, Voda and the Business Forum and the Newcastle United Foundation. I fully understand the perception of crime and concerns about antisocial behaviour, and let me say at this point, no amount of antisocial behaviour is acceptable. So we all must work alongside all agencies to reduce this behaviour by a small group of people. It is understandable that the residents are concerned. However, data shows North Tyneside remains one of the safest places to live in the country. But residents are still worried about the antisocial behaviour. The staycation has influenced the coast visitor numbers. These have increased, and as we know, we have had trouble at the coast and in other areas. Though reported incidents of antisocial behaviour over the summer accounted for 1 in 10,000 visitors. This is thanks to Operation Coast Watch and the development of additional resources to high footfall areas and proactive enforcement work on Tynemouth and Cullercoats metro stations. We must note that over the last 12 years, Northumbria frontline police numbers have been cut by 1,100 due to the 148 million budget cut. These cuts are not sustainable, and I agree we need to increase police officer numbers back to the pre-2010 numbers. Incidentally, the Police and Crime Commissioner has used the PCC precept to go above the government target for police officer recruitment by adding an additional 60 officers to the force. But if we are serious about tackling antisocial behaviour and other criminal activity here in North Tyneside, we need the government to provide the necessary funding to do the job and replace the police officers lost since 2010. So this amendment asks the Chief Constable and evaluates police numbers in North Tyneside, and that the Mayor and the PCC write to the Home Secretary to provide the required funding to protect the residents of North Tyneside. So I support the amendment of this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Councillor Wallace, did you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes. I'm very interested to hear Labour members opposite deploring what they describe as attacks of a personal nature, simply because we've heard comments on the performance of the Police and Crime Commissioner. Frankly, it's astonishing when we have sat through numerous attacks by Labour members on members of the Conservative government, attacks of a personal nature, and yet all of a sudden tonight, when there's an attack upon an elected individual who happens to be Labour, such attacks are deemed inappropriate and unsuitable. So I think that's frankly hypocritical. Secondly, I think it's extremely disappointing, the deletion in this amendment, the deletion of the request that the PCC should meet with both groups on the council every 6 months to allow members to raise specific concerns. Such meetings, I think, could be extremely useful, and I think deleting that part of the motion is extremely disappointing and wrong.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Councillor Bowles?
Thank you, Chair. This amendment removes all accountability of the Police and Crime Commissioner. Councillor Scargill's speech was not a personal attack. It was simply holding the Police and Crime Commissioner accountable for the job that she's paid £86,000 a year to do. If the Police and Crime Commissioner wants to tackle antisocial behaviour, why won't she meet ward councillors? Why won't she meet political groups? Why is it that she'll meet Labour councillors at the drop of a hat? She is paid to represent everyone, not just those who happen to vote Labour. Councillor Johnson says that we should extend an invitation for the Police and Crime Commissioner to come to the Conservative group. We have 6 times. How many invitations is it going to take to get a reply from Kim? If elected councillors can't get a reply, what chance do our residents have? If the Police and Crime Commissioner really wants to tackle antisocial behaviour, she needs to get real about the issues our residents are facing. We won't be supporting this amendment.
Councillor Newman?
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to make any comments because I didn't think I could add to what Councillor Johnson and Councillor Burgess has said, but after hearing some of the comments, I feel I'm going to have to. First off, as Chair of the Housing Committee, I've asked the Police and Crime Commissioner to attend the Housing Committee to give out her priorities, where she's been scrutinised by both members of the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. So if she was afraid of scrutiny, she wouldn't have turned up to the Housing Committee. So I think it's a little bit unfair for you to criticise her when she has attended this council on my invitation and answered questions from both sides of the chamber. The second one is I want to try and strip politics out of this because I have so many residents who have issues with antisocial behaviour. Councillor Burtis knows I've sent 7 emails in the past 2 days over rising issues. Everything in the amendment is factually correct. Police numbers have been cut. Now, whether or not we can agree with the reason, which I'm sure we will disagree with, the facts of the matter, they have been cut. In order for us to tackle antisocial behaviour, the PCC needs to do stuff, the council needs to do stuff, and the council needs to do stuff. Sorry, the government needs to do stuff. We cannot solve this problem if one party, i.e. the government, refuses to acknowledge that they need more funding. I don't think we should make this political. I think there is enough in this amendment for us to put party lines aside and fight for our residents who, let's be fair, there's a major issue with antisocial behaviour across the whole country and this borough, and we need to work together. So I would hope we can put petty party politics aside and try and get a solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. Councillor Westwater?
Yeah, just a very quick comment on Councillor Newman's remarks. You've been a little bit economic with the truth, Councillor Newman. How often did we write to Kim McGuinness to come to the committee, and how often did she not appear? So fair enough, I understand she certainly did appear. But the year I was on the committee, the very last committee meeting we had in the civic year, she turned up to answer questions. But I do know on several occasions that she refused to come along, and it was commented at the committee she's not come along again. She did come along, understandable, eventually, but please make it aware that she didn't come along automatically take a little bit of guidance from the committee and the council for it to come along.
Excuse me, Chair. Sorry, Chair. Can I just quickly come back in there as Chair of the Housing Committee?
You're right. We did invite very quickly. Yeah, very good. We did invite Police and Crime Commissioner to come twice. The first time she had only just been elected and therefore didn't have all of our priorities in place in order to give a thorough report, which I accepted. The second time I invited her, she attended. Councillor Scargill, would you like to move the right to reply? Councillor Scargill.
Request a name vote on the amendment, please.
Right, we will now go to the vote, and it will be a named vote, and we are voting on the amendment.
Okay, so this is a named vote on the substantive motion, on the amended motion. If you can indicate you're for or against. Councillor Ken Barry? Councillor Lewis Bartoli?
Councillor Gary Bell. Councillor Linda Bell. Councillor Liam Bones. Councillor Brian Burdis. Councillor Carol Burdis. Councillor Karen Clark. Councillor Debbie Cox. Councillor Naomi Craven. Councillor Julie Cruddas. Councillor Eddie Dark. Councillor David Drummond. Councillor Peter Early. Councillor Lisa Ferrison. Councillor Michelle Fox. Councillor Sandra Graham. Councillor Tracy Hallway. Councillor John Harrison. Councillor Janet Hunter. Councillor John Hunter. Councillor Val Jameson. Councillor Carl Johnson. Councillor Hannah Johnson. Councillor Christopher Johnston. Councillor Joe Kerwin. Councillor Frank Lott. Councillor Wendy Lott. Councillor Gary Madden. Councillor Louise Marshall. Councillor Pamela McIntyre. Councillor Anthony McMullen. Councillor Jim Montague. Councillor Josephine Mudzingwa. Councillor Martin Murphy. Councillor Tommy Mulvena. Councillor Tricia Niera. Councillor Andy Newman. Councillor Pat Oliver. Councillor John O'Shea. Councillor Norman Percy. Councillor Stephen Phillips. Councillor Bruce Pickard. Councillor Martin Rankin. Norma Redfern, elected Mayor. Councillor Paul Richardson. Councillor Willie Samuel. Councillor Ollie Scargill.
Against.
Councillor Jane Shaw. Councillor Matthew Thurloway. Councillor Joan Walker. Councillor Judith Wallace. Councillor George Westwater. Councillor Matt Wilson. It's 45 for the amendment and 8 against. So the substantive or the amendment is now carried and it becomes a substantive motion.
Would anyone like to speak to the substantive motion now, please? Councillor Burdis.
Thank you, Chair. At this particular point in time, I wasn't going to speak, but there have been some comments made about antisocial behaviour within the borough. It comes into my portfolio as Cabinet Member, and whilst the opposition know, quite a few of the opposition know that I have worked with them individually and as a group, and I have met with several ones from different wards and been out with them even on antisocial behaviour issues. And that has always been offered. So whilst I'm not going to reflect back on the discussion that we've had about the PCC, I just want members on the opposite side to know, as in with all of our other members, there is scope for me to speak and to go out and to discuss antisocial behaviour issues within their wards. And if the Police and Crime Commissioner's diary allows her, because she's not sitting waiting for an invite, if her diary allows her to do things, then obviously we would invite the PCC along as well. But I have opened and worked tirelessly with our opposite members on the opposite side, and I just wanted that to be recorded, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burdis. Anyone else? Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just following on from what Councillor Carol Burdis has said, I absolutely agree that she has worked with us, and we're grateful for that. We're all very keen to try and reduce the severe problems of antisocial behaviour, and the help is much appreciated. I don't think that this motion in any way implies that there hasn't been that work from the Cabinet Member. And as I say, we do appreciate it, because antisocial behaviour is a huge problem for many of our residents, and one which we're all very keen to tackle, to reduce and hopefully to eliminate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Councillor Mulvena.
I think what people have failed to pick up here is that the police force serves the whole of Northumbria, which is a very large area. It's lost 1,100 police officers in the last 10 years or so. Yes, we've gotten another 560 back, but we've got to also remember that those police officers aren't fully trained yet. They're all probationary police officers. Some of them don't make it to the end of their probationary period for various reasons. But the other thing that no one's taken into account is, over that length of time, the population of Northumbria has actually grown. So despite the fact that we were 1,100 down, we're probably a lot more down in real terms. And this government, as has been said, has failed to fund the police service correctly. It doesn't matter what formula they use, they've cut it. We've only got to look across our borough and look at how many little police stations have disappeared. You know, they were places where people felt a bit safer. They could go to the police station and make their complaint over the desk. Now everything's done by phone or email or Facebook or Twitter or whatever the hell else is on them going at that particular time. But in reality, the police are struggling big style to actually cope with things. And this government has totally failed to understand that. But having said that, it does the same with the rest of the Blue Line services. Look at our fire brigade that's been slashed over the years. You know, I mean, we used to have a fire station in Wallsend. It's not there anymore. You know, if you have a fire now, you hope they turn up. In fact, you're quite pleased if the guy next door's got a hose pipe. It's as bad as that. Ambulances, there's not as many ambulances as there used to be. You know, I mean, public sector, slaughtered. And, you know, at the end of the day, all of these services are what actually affects antisocial behaviour across the whole area. Add to that the poverty that's actually been brought in, you know, over the last few years. Poverty affects antisocial behaviour. And this government has totally neglected it, and the opposition sitting across there really want to actually take their heads out of the sand, because that's where they seem to be buried. We started off this whole debate about the Police and Crime Commissioner. I don't think they actually understand what the job is, let alone to criticise. I mean, it was said early on that the Chief Constable deals with the numbers and deals with the allocation of police to various areas, not the PPC. The PPC is like a councillor. She's a conduit into the police source. You know, and they want to get their facts right. And get, as I said, get their heads out of the sand. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mulvaney. Councillor Scargill?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think that was awfully personal, and maybe if she was doing the job well, people would understand what it was. I think what we have seen this evening is yet more grandstanding from the Labour Party about their progress tackling antisocial behaviour. I imagine this comes straight from the script when Kim is campaigning for Labour. As per usual from Labour, it's always the government's fault. They completely ignore the powers they have as a council and that the PCC holds. The PCC doesn't get paid this amount of money to simply win the Labour Party elections. It is a shame that tonight Labour seem to have taken the opportunity to put Labour campaign sessions above actually tackling antisocial behaviour in North Tyneside. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scargill. Councillor Thurloway?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, the Conservatives have a new leader. I think they want us to ignore the last 12 years, unfortunately. Both of the Conservative motions tonight absolve the government of all responsibility, really. It fails to acknowledge austerity, and it devolves blame to local politicians and local organisations. It's just nonsense, really.
Thank you, Councillor Thurloway. Councillor Johnson?
Thank you, Chair.
Would you like the right of...
Absolutely. Ironic that Councillor Scargill shall accuse the Labour Party of grandstanding when he moves a motion on antisocial behaviour and grandstands about the Police and Crime Commissioner. If you cast your mind back a couple of years ago, it was the Conservative government which introduced Police and Crime Commissioners. The Conservative government set the salary for Police and Crime Commissioners. The Labour Party's last two manifestos tried to abolish Police and Crime Commissioners. Disgraceful personal attacks on a woman who's not yet to defend herself, from the same party who had an opposition candidate who continued in the last Police and Crime Commissioner elections with various misogynistic attacks on Kim McGuinness, who he then smashed in the last elections, winning the election clearly. If Kim McGuinness isn't doing a good job, why does the electorate of Northumberland keep electing her? Kim doesn't need me to defend her, she's more than capable of defending herself. While the Tories grandstand, we pick up the pieces left of 12 years of Conservative cuts. Cuts to police officers, cuts to youth services, all leading to an increase in antisocial behaviour. Kim has went above and beyond the government target of more police officers, using the precept to increase the level of police long past what the government want to do. Kim is doing a fantastic job for this region as Police and Crime Commissioner. It's why she's been elected time again and why she'll continue to be elected in the future. You can't possibly take £148 million from a budget and expect the same level of service that you got in 2010. The ironic thing about it all, however, is that antisocial behaviour is going down in North Tyneside, and that is as a direct result of this council and the Police and Crime Commissioner working together, multi-agency partnership, to tackle antisocial behaviour. We need more honest graft from councillors, not grandstanding from the Conservatives, and we can tackle antisocial behaviour. Stop absolving the government of blame and do something about it, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously,
Point of order, Chair. Hadn't Councillor Johnson just exercised the right to reply?
Sorry? Yeah, I'm sorry, Councillor Rankin. You're right, Councillor. We'll now go to the vote, and we're voting on the substantive motion. All those in favour?
Against?
Thank you. And those against? Is that an abstention? Are there any abstentions? Thank you. 47 votes for the motion, no votes against the motion, 9 abstentions. We now move on to motion 3. Can I invite Councillor Samuel to move the motion, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. We are in the middle of a cost of living crisis. Inflation is currently at just under 10% and rising. Wages are not keeping pace with inflation, and as things stand, many people in this borough are struggling to make ends meet. As the weather turns colder, it will get worse. Fuel prices have surged in the last year or so. In the most recent proposed rise to the fuel cap, the price cap was going to be raised from £1,971 per year to £3,549. We had a prolonged period in the summer where we had no government, but instead we had a Tory civil war, which on the outset seemed to be even more bloody than the local Tory civil war we seem to be witnessing opposite. Our prospective PM declared that she was against handouts, with the clear implication that no further help from government would be forthcoming. However, it became politically impossible for government not to step in, so we've been offered the restriction in the fuel price cap for domestic customers at £2,500 and the deal offered in the past few days for business customers. £2,500 still represents a rise of around 30%. With our people struggling already between eating or heating, it is too much. Alternative Labour has put forward a plan to freeze the cap at its present level of £1,701, and I will go through that, I'm really pleased to hear. It includes a freeze in energy bills for all domestic energy customers, support for customers not protected by the price cap, making sure that the price that people pay on prepayment meters pay for energy is the same as people who pay their bills monthly, a freeze in energy bills for all domestic energy customers, support for customers not protected by the price cap, making sure the price people pay on prepayments that pay enough for energy is the same as people who pay their bills monthly. Stopping energy bills from rising would have been a fully funded measure. The Labour proposal would have paid for that in 3 ways. First, by increased tax revenues from oil and gas producers. Labour would close the government's absurd loophole in their energy profits levy, backdate the start to the date when the Labour first called for a windfall tax to January, and accounting for higher gas and oil prices would raise £8 billion. Second, we would raise the already pledged 14 billion of non-targeted funding to prevent bills from rising, giving people the security to plan ahead rather than giving back money in handouts later on. Finally, by keeping energy bills down, Labour would reduce the rate of inflation, leading to a reduction in government debt interest payments of around 7 billion. That's because higher inflation increases government expenditure or coupon payments, as a note on gilts, which is how a significant proportion of government debt is held. However, the government refuses to consider an extension of the windfall tax, preparing to raise the money through additional borrowing. Fuel companies, which in their own words have been making more money than they know what to do with, these profits weren't made through shrewd business decisions, were made thanks to Putin's war in the Ukraine. Why should they not be taxed and this money used to keep prices down? It seemed that borrowing was a bad idea over the last decade, when interest rates were at historically a low level. Now, with interest rates surging to high levels, it's become a good idea all of a sudden. I have to break the news to my grandchildren, 10 and 2 years old, that they will not only be paying my fuel bills for years to come, but they will be paying the cost of giving tax cuts to billionaires, which we'll hear about tomorrow, which the country cannot afford. In the short term, I have to witness our borough into fuel poverty, driving more people into food banks, which isn't acceptable. There's no easy answer to these problems, I concede that straight away, but the government is choosing the wrong answers, and I urge council to support the motion. We'll do, of course, what we can do locally to mitigate the impact of the cost of living crisis, but we need government action that would actually work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel. Councillor Fox, do you wish to second the motion?
Yes, I second this motion.
Thank you. I'll now invite members to speak to the motion. Councillor Bartoli.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Samuel's motion appears to be another cut and paste motion straight from Labour's central office and out of the Labour playbook, which as usual is out of date and highlights Labour's lack of ideas and one-dimensional financial strategies. I do have some sympathy with Councillor Samuel, as he's clearly been busy recently. He can't spend a lot of time on motions when he's been engaged in ensuring the destruction of the conservation areas and heritage assets of Tynemouth.
Chair, point of order. I object to that comment.
I'm quite certain you do. You got in before me. That has no relevance to the matter we're discussing at the moment, Councillor Bartoli. Carry on.
This motion asks for a cap of £1,971.
Yes, would you withdraw that remark?
Chair, I think the remark was that Councillor Samuel had been heavily involved in the destruction of the conservation area and heritage assets in time.
Chair, point of order. Point of order, that has no relevance.
Chair, I would like the remark withdrawn.
Draw that remark, Councillor
An apology,
Bartoli.
please.
I think my job is to represent my constituents, and I think my constituents would be horrified if I was to withdraw.
Chair, point of order.
It is a point of order.
It's got nothing to do with it.
I've been advised that this really is not relevant, Councillor Bartoli. Yes, please move on.
Point of order, Chair, motion without notice.
I've been advised.
Point of order, Chair, motion without notice. I would like to move that if Councillor Bartoli does not withdraw the remark, we not further hear from the member and exclude him from the meeting.
I'd second that, Chair.
Councillor Bartoli, are you going to withdraw this remark?
Chair, I think
you don't want to have to leave the meeting, do you?
I don't want to have to leave the meeting, and I think in the the interests of democracy, it's best we're all here. But I'm also was elected to do a job, and that's to represent my residents. Councillor Samuel.
Point of order.
Chair, should be ashamed of the actions he's taken in my ward, and I think I rightly stand by those remarks.
Councillor Lott.
Chair, can I seek some guidance? Is Councillor Bartoli's remark related to Councillor Samuel's position as Chair of the Planning Committee and the proposal regarding demolition of Tynemouth Library? If that is the case, can that be confirmed?
Councillor Lott, it's not.
then that's prejudging Councillor Samuel's position on that, and it has no place in this chamber.
Point of order, Chair. Councillor Samuel's already made his position clear on the matter.
Thank you, Councillor Lott. I was unaware of that.
Chair, that it doesn't relate to the library. It relates to the 7-storey block of flats that they've just plonked in the middle
I
of the
presume
conservation
Councillor Bartoli is referring to time at station, Chair, in which case I don't think it's appropriate to make these comments. I'm entitled to carry out my function as Chair of Planning without such personal remarks.
Chair, I've moved the motion without notice. The motion should be carried. I've gave Councillor Bartoli the chance to withdraw the motion. He hasn't, so that we would like to move the motion without notice. Councillor Bartoli not be further heard, and I exclude from the remainder of the meeting.
Councillor Bartoli, one more time. Are you going to withdraw the remark?
Thank you, Chair. In all good conscience, I can't withdraw that remark.
Sorry?
In all good conscience, I can't withdraw that remark.
Well, in that case, you'll need to leave the chamber.
Thank you.
Chair, if that was a motion put forward, it hasn't been voted on.
Do you have... Yes, Michelle is the seconder.
To this motion.
Yeah.
Motion to the leave, right?
Sorry?
Can we have a vote on whether or not Councillor Bartoli should leave?
We have a vote on whether he should leave the chamber. We'll now go to a vote on whether Councillor Bartoli should leave the chamber. All those in favour? All those against? The vote is carried, 46 and in favour and 8 against. Councillor Bartoli, would you... I think we're up to...
We're just debating the motion.
I'll now invite any members who wish to speak to the motion. Councillor...
Thank you, Chair. I've got a speech I have to miss a bit out, so hold on. The motion asks for a cap of £1,971. However, if Councillor Samuel had bothered to write his own motion, he would realise that the Conservative government has already done more than he is proposing, with a £400 energy bill discount, £150 green levy removal, and £150 council tax rebate. Bills will be well below the level that he is proposing. Our new Prime Minister has announced a package of policies which will not only act immediately to help households, but will increase domestic production of energy and security for our future. These include a payment of £650 to households on means-tested benefits, a second payment of £324 before the end of October. For those who have state pension age and are low income, there's pension credit with the average payment of around £3,300 per year. There is £352,000 of additional funding for North Tyneside Council discretionary payments, an additional energy rebate of £170 for those on council tax support, discretionary housing payments for those who are having difficulties paying rent. Individuals on disability benefits will receive further payment of £150 in addition to the £650 cost of living payment. A new 6-month scheme to protect businesses and other non-domestic energy users, including charities and public sector organisations like schools. There is a new energy task force. We are launching a new oil and gas licensing round, expected to lead to an extra 100 licences. We are lifting the moratorium on the UK shale gas production where there is local support. We should get gas flowing in as soon as 6 months. And to drive forward the acceleration of new sources of energy supply from the North Sea oil and gas to clean energy like nuclear, wind and solar. For the assistance of Councillor Samuel and his colleagues, these are called policies, and taken action as opposed to this motion, which is the usual myopic Labour answer to every problem. Tax, tax, tax. This policy from Labour, both nationally and locally, is always the same. No mention of growth or investment or making savings or innovation or new technologies, just the childish dogma of socialism. In fact, the motion itself even demonstrates Labour's lack of ideas. I quote, "This could be paid for by a combination of windfall taxes and other measures." They couldn't even think of the other measures in their own motion.
Earlier this year, Labour called for a 10% windfall tax on energy companies. The Conservatives have actually gone further and introduced a 25% increase. So what's their answer to this? More tax. Energy companies currently pay 65% tax. So how much is enough for Councillor Samuels? 75%? 85%? 100%? Labour's one-dimensional policy discourages investment, discourages growth and stifles industry, and we therefore won't be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bones. Councillor Johnson? No, I've got Councillor Johnson here, sorry. Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start, I know on the last motion I was calling for us to go together to speak as one voice, more or less. On a motion like this, we will be political. But I would like to think that everybody in this chamber could be political, yet show respect for each other's office. I'd like to think in the years that I've been here, and the many political motions that I've spoken on and presented, that I would have treated the opposition with the respect their office demands. So I would hope that we can disagree, but respect each other. That being said, I am political, and I think that this is a political motion. I'm not going to talk about policies as such. Councillor Sammy's already talked about policy, the opposition talked about policy. I could talk about how the TUC said that you could actually spend a fraction of the money by the energy companies and save a load of money. We could talk about that. What I want to talk about is fairness, social justice, fairness. The reality out there is that UK gas producers and electricity generators are making excess profits of 170 billion. That's excess profits, not profits, excess. All down to the war in Ukraine. It was reported by returners that a British windfall tax on energy companies would not change BT's £18 billion investment plan. The chief executive has already told the shareholders those exact words. So BP is saying that if you increase the windfall tax, it will not interfere with investment. And BP's already reported the biggest quarterly profits in 14 years at £6.9 billion in the 3 months to June. Shell recorded even higher quarterly profits at £9 billion. That's the reality on the ground. But something that I'm really concerned about, that seems to happen all the time, we seem to talk about investments, company profits, share prices, but it's not about that. It's about people. It's about the people who are struggling out there with inflation over 10%. And what a lot of people will realise, people like myself who have got families, that 10% is not evenly distributed. Certain food staples have gone up triple, 30%, 35%. Butter, bread, it's all gone up. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about energy prices going up. Even with the government's help, they're still going to be record high. Petrol is through the roof. Diesel is through the roof. And even when we look at figures on a chart, projections, we lose sight of what it really is about, which is a family struggling to put food on the table, rushing to a food bank to see if there's a parcel free. It's about taking steps we wouldn't normally do, like telling our children no when we should be saying yes. That's what this is about. It's about justice. It's about all of us. It's about single people struggling. It's about families struggling. It's about pensioners seeing their pensions not go as far as it used to go. And what's the government's plan? Borrow hundreds of billions of pounds, let the companies keep 100% of the profits, and we, the taxpayers, pay it back. That is not fair. I'm all for companies making profits, but it needs to be fair. And I've always said in this room, and I've never been shy about it, I've always told people about this, I grew up in poverty, absolute poverty. I remember poverty like a lot of people have never seen, and I never thought I would ever see this level of poverty in this country again. And the plan that we've got in front of us simply isn't fair. And for all the people out there supporting the government's plan, I'm just going to say one thing to you. Shame on you.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. Councillor McMullen.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting getting accused of having a copy and paste thing there. That definitely sounds like it's just been read off a head office email, an earlier comment by Councillor Bones. But going through this, what annoys me is that we've just had the list of all the things that are happening, and there's a £400 here that we're going to get given for 1 year only, for 6 months. That doesn't actually fix any problem. When you look at it, we talk about these price caps of 2,500, 1,971. when you get to it, it's all about unit rates and consumption. And that doesn't spread it equally, as Councillor Newman was saying. You know, those rates are creeping up, and people who have high rates, which may be because they're on medical support items that use a lot of energy, it could be anything that does that. It doesn't actually go to addressing the problems of reducing that unit cost, and that's what hits people. It really annoys me of the bit of what we're putting stick and plasters on, which are solid numbers over numbers that are variable. So we might say the cap is 2,500. That doesn't mean the cap is 2,500. Your bill might be higher than that. People don't understand that because we go around in the media and even as politicians blanding these numbers around, and they're not accurate to people's real life situations, which really, really annoys me, talking to residents. The other one was we just had a big list of all these wonderful incentives that will happen if you're on these particular benefits. There are people I know that aren't on the benefits that would normally, or in the past, they would be on, because they're hounded or inundated with having to go to work classes every single day of the week at a job centre for £30 a week job allowance. So the bus fare to get there, if they can find a bus, to get them to the job centre, which is in the wrong village because some government advisor somewhere has decided that's the one they have to go to. They aren't eligible for that benefit anymore, therefore they're not eligible for this energy benefit. So there's an extra set of loops and hurdles that are set there which sound perfectly reasonable but are actually unachievable for the residents to actually get to. So yeah, that is what annoys me with these things. We've got a massive melee of wonderful sounding ideas, but the access to those for actual residents and how it actually benefits residents isn't correct. So top and bottom of it is the energy market's knackered, as I'm going to say, and it needs a sorting out. We came up with something that we've been saying as a national party for quite some time, so it's no surprise it's going to sound like the National Party, because that's what we want. You know, we speak with one voice. And then the other thing is, it's great in the middle of that. There's a nice comment about fracking, which I think we've had in this council before, for overwhelming, not welcoming of that particular item coming here. But it seems that that's quite welcome from the other side.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the points, that long list of measures that was reeled off by Councillor Bones. I just want to say that despite the government cap and despite the raft of measures the government has introduced, which is a good thing, it goes part way to helping people, but it definitely does not go the full way. Major organisations involved in tackling poverty, including the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, have done detailed analysis of all of those rafts and all of those measures, and they highlight that even if you're entitled to all of those things, if you're a family living on low income, you would still have a massive gap in terms of your income in meeting the increasing inflation and fuel costs, estimated to be around £800 short. That's going to push a lot of people into difficulties. They'll have to do without the essentials, including food, hygiene, heat. They may be forced to borrow at high interest rates. That's likely to get worse after April 23 because, as we all know, this government's made no commitment beyond that time to continue these support measures. So even if you do get them and you're £800 short this year up to April, you're going to be a lot worse off from that point on. So this government has got a lot to answer in terms of actually doing the full job and really providing the support that's required. I'm pleased to say, as a local authority, we recognise that this situation is pushing more people into difficulty. People who've maybe never experienced poverty or hardship before are going to struggle. In response to that, we've got a whole range of measures in place. We'll have a full commitment, as enshrined in the Council Plan, in our Equally Well strategy agreed through the Health and Wellbeing Board. Those practical measures are doing a lot to help people and alleviate hardship. We've got measures in place around food, fuel, clothing, household bills, emergency funds to help people in crisis situations, a whole range of other initiatives also. We've got limited resources, but we have a firm commitment to put those resources where they're needed in this borough. We're listening to our residents, we're here to support our residents, we're working across the board with third sector, public, private sector organisations to maximise and add value to the resources we do have at our disposal. I just want to assure residents in North Tyneside that we are doing our very best in difficult circumstances. We will be promoting and publicising all those measures to our residents. We're in process of developing a one-stop shop online resource so that all those forms of support will be available to people. We recognise not everyone has access to digital forms and ICT, so it will be promoted in hard copy through our North Tyneside Residents magazine. And we're ongoing developing things in response to our residents in this situation. For example, we're launching warm welcome hubs across the borough, utilising council facilities to make sure people at least have somewhere warm to go through this winter where they can get access to hot drinks, etc. We're working with our third sector partners and have made grants available to community and voluntary sector organisations to offset the costs for them to also get involved in providing warm welcome hubs. So I just want to reassure everyone we're doing our very best here at a local level, but that's everything within our power. There are some things we don't have power over. We operate within a national context of a Tory government, and that's simply not stepping up to the mark and delivering for our people in this borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Chris Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just raise 3 points regarding the motion? Based really upon sound economic advice, not emotion. First of all, rate of inflation. Your motion, you actually state, this will have the added benefit of reducing projected inflation rates. Well, you know, I can come out with, that's rubbish, but I don't rely on me. I quote Paul Johnson, Director of Institute of Fiscal Studies, and he said, assuming this is only a temporary subsidy, this is looking at that, then over this time, the average rate of inflation will certainly not change. It's a saving this year, but it's not a saving in the long run. In other words, it's investment actually that will reduce inflation. Secondly, what happens after 6 months? Now, after 6 months, you haven't got nothing on there about what you're going to do after 6 months. But after 6 months, Keir Starmer, he was interviewed on the Today programme. And I'm not be so personal, I'll just say he simply said this: we'll have to assess the situation in April according to the forecasts as they are then. In other words, usual waffle. Okay. The Institute for Fiscal Studies warned that support would be needed for much, much longer than 6 months. What is your intention to do? Is it again to raid the coffers of Shell and BP in order to fund this? Right, okay, that's all right, but listen carefully, North Tyneside. The obvious criticism of a windfall tax has always been the threat to future investment. Okay? Well, actually, I'm very surprised that North Tyneside Labour councillors who are so focused upon achieving carbon net zero, okay, by 2030, should risk investment by the very companies like Shell and BP who are...
Councillor, 1 second. Councillor Johnson? Other Johnson? Carl Johnson? Carry on.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start again. I'm very surprised that North Tyneside Labour councillors who are so focused upon achieving carbon net zero by 2030, some 20 years in advance of this country, should risk investment by the very companies, like Shell and BP, who are going to be in the forefront of actually achieving that goal. They are the people that will actually get us there, and you're basically wanting to hinder them. Okay? They need to keep those profits and they need to use them constructively. Okay? They will bring about carbon net zero. They need to be encouraged to invest. You don't seem to understand the word investment. You simply seem to think about windfall tax, take, rather, as Councillor Bartoli was trying to make the point before. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you.
Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Chair. To be honest, a lot of what I'm about to say has just been picked up by Councillor Clark. It's the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, and want to 100% reiterate what she said. We've got all these things coming from Councillor Bones about council tax rebate, lump sums, energy bill rebates, but there's a lovely graph here. He clearly doesn't understand the numbers, and I'd like to share this graph with him because basically the cost increase is a big bar on the graph and the government support is a 4 little one, and as Councillor Clark pointed out, it's just short of £800. And apologies to Councillor Johnson, but I do get quite emotional when I find out that low-income families are going to be £800 short, families that can't afford to live currently, and then they've got to find another £800. So I do apologise for getting emotional about this type of thing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Who says local politics is boring? Tax, tax, tax. That was what Councillor Bones and Councillor Johnson have both repeated tonight. I'm going to reply by saying borrowing, borrowing, borrowing. I've been a councillor since 2015, and I remember Councillor Judith Wallace lecturing us all about the deficit, about the national debt, and about the mess the Labour Party left by borrowing. And to give Councillor Wallace some credit, she's very consistent, she stuck to her principles. Unfortunately, now we have a Conservative Party which is more interested in protecting shareholders instead of protecting hard-working people who will have to pay for this energy crisis twice. There will be real hardship this winter, and not just for the poorest in society, but for the vast majority of people in society. Energy companies are making excess profits from the war in Ukraine. It's as simple as that. And someone needs to tell the Conservative Party that we are not the Cayman Islands. The UK isn't some sort of offshore tax haven. We're a population of about more than 70 million people. And I think that needs to really get through from top to bottom in the Tory party. And once again, I think if you look throughout history, the Conservative Party is on the side of big business and profit instead of people. And I'll be happy to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thirlway. Councillor Mulvaney?
I may have misheard some of the things that have been said by the opposition tonight when they talked about the fracking and how gas would be available in 6 months' time. That's quite true, but it'll be so much it'll probably only fit into one cooker. You know, so one person round beside the fracking operation will be able to run their cooker off this gas. And then there was the mention of inflation, how it wouldn't go up. Well, I must have been dreaming the day because I thought the interest rate went up by 0.5%. You know, so maybe I misheard that as well. But one of the interesting things, and I don't think anybody's actually thought about this, is in the 70s we had North Sea oil and North Sea gas, and we were going to live a life of Riley, you know, on the profits, and we're going to have cheap gas and all that sort of thing. And then they privatised it, and we never got cheap gas or cheap oil or anything like that. But what they did do was they did away with most of the storage for gas. As a result, now we take gas out of the North Sea and we send it down to France where they have got storage, and they buy it off us at a price, and then we buy it back at slightly more. So I don't quite understand the economics of that. And this is what seems to be actually being given to us time and time again. You know, we're getting it out of the ground in one hand and giving it to somebody else who then sells us it back. You know, for the want of a few gas storage units. Maybe this government, instead of taking the moratorium of fracking today, which there's no evidence that it doesn't affect the planet, you know, would have put the money into gas storage. Then we could, instead of selling it to the French on the cheap, we could have at least had some of our own gas to help out the, you know, it may not be enough to actually cover the whole country, and we still might have to buy some gas, but at the end of the day, it would make far more economic sense than some of the things that I've heard put across tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mulvaney. Councillor Carl Johnson?
Thanks, Chair. I wasn't planning on speaking, but just to clarify something Councillor Chris Johnson said. It is absolutely correct that profits are needed to invest, but this is excess profits. This is profits not expected to be made. The government's own treasury, the Conservative government's own treasury thinks that excess profits will be £170 billion over the next 2 years. And BP said that it's like a cash machine. BP have also said that a windfall tax will not deter investment. So Councillor Johnson couldn't be more wrong when the head of one of the largest profit makers from this windfall tax, that would pay the windfall tax, has said it wouldn't deter investment. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Martin Rankin.
Thank you, Chair. Labour Party, tax, tax, tax. 12 years of a Conservative government, and under Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, we have the highest tax burden in 50 years in the UK.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Councillor Early.
Just a point about Councillor Johnson's comments about Sir Keir Starmer saying that at the end of the 6-month period he would need to take stock of the situation and review what further measures he would advise. And I think Councillor Johnson referred to that as absolute waffle. If I remember rightly, not too far back, although it was at least one Prime Minister back, I heard Paul Lewis, the money-saving expert, in an absolute rage, stating that at that time the government wouldn't describe what kind of measures they would take because the revised cap hadn't been set, and in view of that, they couldn't plan any further measures. I mean, this was in the hiatus where we had a zombie government, but nevertheless, the point that Paul just made was that the algorithm for predicting what the new cap would be was available, and he had done the calculation himself weeks in advance. So I think it's pretty rich of Councillor Johnson to criticise Sir Keir Starmer for not being able to predict what the market will be in 6 months' time, when the previous Tory cabinet couldn't even predict what they would do in relation to a cap that could have been calculated even 6 days before it was announced.
Thank you, Councillor Early. Can I now invite them? Is anybody else? Councillor Fox. Councillor Fox.
Thank you. I second this motion to seek further government action for its residents, businesses and charities struggling with energy costs in North Tyneside during a national cost of living crisis. A crisis during which UK gas producers and electricity generators are forecast to make excess profits totalling as much as £170 billion over the next 2 years. All while 2 in 5 adults in the UK face the choice between eating and heating. Over 6 million people go without heating. 11 million people are behind on their energy bills, and 15 million are using credit to pay for essentials such as energy and food. This motion also seeks to publicise the help and support the Council has on offer to provide those residents who are struggling while fuel and food prices continue to rise with the help they need when it is needed most. I'd also like to commend the Council's new warm welcome hubs to provide community-based warmth and comfort to local residents, and for its continued hard work to support struggling people, families and vulnerable residents during some of the most difficult times. I hope all members will support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to correct some of the points which Councillor Mulvenna was making with regard to fracking. He's talking about minimal supply, whereas in fact the evidence is that there's some 50 years' worth of supply beneath our feet within the UK. With regard to the techniques of fracking, there is no difference from quarrying or mining, and there's no reason why fracking should therefore be treated in a different manner from those well-established industries. Indeed, it's proved hugely successful within the US. Energy security is hugely important to this country, and availability of energy, of course, affects the price. Putin's war in Ukraine has demonstrated the importance of energy security, and the government is right to take prompt action to address those fears. We're fortunate in this country that we're not nearly so dependent on Russian fuels as are some of the countries on the continent of Europe. But energy security is something which the government is right to address, as I say. Whilst renewables have their attractions, the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine, and we need backup for in those frequent occasions. So I welcome, therefore, the government's new focus on energy security, and I hope that it will continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Councillor Lott, Frank Lott.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, perhaps the final word on fracking should be given to the original owner of Quadrilla and the chap who ran his public affairs side of things, who stated in the Guardian today that fracking simply won't work in Britain. The shale doesn't exist in the right sort of quantities. The entire scale is inappropriate. And the guy who was originally brought in to develop fracking in this country has said it doesn't have a future.
Thank you, Councillor Lott. Councillor Samuel, would you now like to exercise your right of reply?
Indeed, I would, Chair. I'm going to go back to basics here, I think. I mean, we've had quite a long debate and a lot of points have been covered. But the basis of all this, and where this motion was coming from, is this winter we're going to see people in unbelievable poverty. They're going to be struggling to pay fuel bills. We've seen the cost of living increasing. Everybody should know by now when you go to the supermarkets, just about everything has gone up in price. People are going to really suffer. And the point of this motion was to try and find a way to move it forward, to promote a policy where that suffering could be minimised as much as possible. Didn't smooth out all the curves. There'd be more issues to sort out in maybe 6 months' time, but nevertheless, trying to address the fact that our people are going to suffer this winter and suffer really badly. It's what motivated me coming to politics, and I realised when I came into politics you can expect some personal abuse, and I've had to take some of that this evening. That's fine. Bring it on. If I find I have to take that kind of person for doing my job properly, and therefore actually trying to make the case for our people not to suffer so much poverty, then fine, bring it on, if that's the way you want to play it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel. We'll now go to the vote. Those in favour of the motion? Thank you. And those against? "46 votes for the motions, no abstentions, and 7 votes against the motion. We now move on to motion 4. Can I invite Councillor Andy Newman to move the motion, please?
Thank you, Chair. Sort of wish this one came first because I wasn't hoping to be political on this motion, but tensions are rising, so I hope we can calm it down a bit. I wanted to start by saying that I chose the wording to the motion very carefully. I could have done what myself and many others have done in the past and talked about renationalisation, and I make no apologies for my belief that water companies should be publicly owned, or that they would be better run, or that, in my opinion, the investment needed to solve this issue would have been made a long time ago if they were publicly owned. However, they're not. The reality is they're privately owned, and we need to fix this growing issue. And I'm going to ask for that rarest of rarity, which is consensus among politicians, which is a dangerous thing to ask for, so we'll try my best. The problem is that the water network has been put under pressure every year for a long time now. We've got increased population, urbanisation and climate change, which is meaning that the instances of contaminated water running into the waterways is increasing. So for those people who don't know, what I'm talking about is untreated sewage going into the waterways. Generally, the excuse given by the water companies is that it's to help with the overflow during heavy rain. However, there's been a number of instances when water companies have used this as an excuse, and many have been fined. Now, some companies release a lot more than others, and some are very, very good at following the rules. But in the past few years, there's been a number of scandals related to this practice. For example, Southern Water received a £90 million fine for violations, and over the past 10 years, close to £500 million worth of fines have been issued to water companies for various violations. There's also been reports lately that sewage monitoring equipment was either not installed or was not even turned on, and a BBC report states that this has resulted in over a quarter of sewage discharges being unmonitored. Now, recent petitions have been sent to Parliament, and at first the government refused to look into a complete ban of sewage discharge, but after a long debate, they decided to take a half measure, which was to make it a legal requirement to reduce the amount of sewage discharge that the companies make. However, there has been reports that this hasn't been followed, and there has been an increase in sewage discharges. The current government's plan, in my opinion, is just not ambitious enough, and it's not taking this issue with the severity that it deserves. Currently, companies will need to make investments on a long-term programme to reduce, not ban, but reduce the discharges and have a target date of 2050. However, on the current projections, by 2030, there will still be around 325,000 sewage dumps a year on Britain's beaches. Now, water companies do acknowledge the problem, and there has been some investment. For example, Northumbria Water has made announcements that it's installing drainage pipes at Cullercoats, and it is welcome news. However, I firstly question the timing of these announcements, given the amount of pressure that they've been on over the past couple of years by a number of protest groups. But I also go back to saying that I don't think it's ambitious. I think we should be looking at a total ban on all sewage releases. Now, I'm not so naive as to think this will happen overnight. It will take a large amount of infrastructure, and it will need detailed negotiations between not only the government and the water companies, but all interested parties in order to get a finalised timescale in place. But I do not believe as well that the public should need to pay for this, because water companies have, according to The Guardian, handed shareholders an average of £2 billion of profits every year since 1991. On that last year alone, water companies made profits of £2.8 billion. So I think they've got adequate resources to fix the problem. I think there's a consensus among the public for wanting to introduce a total ban. And I'm hoping that everybody in this chamber can put politics aside for once and vote in favour of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. Councillor Drummond, do you wish to second the motion?
Yes, Chair, and reserve the right to speak.
I'll now invite members to speak to the motion. Councillor Barry.
I support this motion. We have a problem in Cullercoats with the poor quality of the water in the harbour. Although it's not as a direct result of discharging sewage straight into the harbour, there is sewage in the harbour. A lot of the problems we are finding is there's a geological fault that runs right through the harbour, and a lot of this contamination is coming down from a lot higher up in Marden quarry areas. I have to praise Northumbrian Water. They have, after myself and fellow councillors, the fishermen and the Harbour Working Committee and the residents complained and campaigned heavily, they're now starting to fix problems. One of the problems I have found out was, as was mentioned, the work in John Street where they're diverting a culvert, which they didn't realise they had, and just found recently, and they're diverting it into the main sewage. So my personal opinion is we shouldn't be discharging into the waterways. It destroys all the life in those rivers, and we actually need some of the plants to produce the air that we're breathing. So, and they produce a lot more than the trees produce. So I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. Councillor Drummond.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to say people will be supporting this motion. I'd just like to thank my colleague, Councillor Samuel, who's done an absolute awful lot of work in colour codes, which has just been mentioned. And again, I hope everybody will support it. It's self-explanatory.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. While this is a huge issue nationally, and particularly on the south coast and the south east coast, it is particularly bad in that neck of the woods. In North Tyneside, we have some fantastic open spaces and some fantastic beaches. And with the exception of colour codes, which we know is unrelated to sewage discharge into the sea, we have excellent beaches, excellent water quality right along our coastline. If every water company in the country was as good as number of waterway, we would be in a lot better position in a national situation than we are. They have made massive investment and continue to make massive investment. They're about to invest 120 million into the sewage treatment works at East Howden to try and stop issues just like these. They have invested over the years historically right across the borough, not just at the coastline, invested in Flooding, Longbenton and Kilworth, invested in various other schemes around and have been a very good partner to us over the years. They're also the only water company that uses 100% of their sewage sludge to create renewable energy in the country. They do some fantastic stuff in the North East, and this is not a direct attack on Nothing But Water from our group. We fully appreciate they do lots of work. This is the natural situation is getting out of hand, particularly on the south coast, and something needs to be done about this on a national level, but it's not an attack on Nothing But Water. They do some fantastic work in our area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Graham.
Councillor Johnson's just taken out the words right out of my mouth that we do some fantastic work with Northumbrian Water, and I'm delighted that they're able to do the work in John Street. It is to do with contaminated groundwater from a disused culvert, and that will be diverted into the combined sewer network. And they will see if that works. I mean, this is a trial, but we will see if that works and has a positive effect on the water quality in Cullercoats Bay. But it isn't a quick fix. The water has to be tested for 4 years to see if it comes up to the blue flag status, which we hope that it does. But we continue to work with our partners and the Environment Agency, and they've been fantastic to work with and listen to everything that we've said. And I just want to pay tribute to them. But to support this wholeheartedly, because there are other areas of the country where there's sewage being poured out in vast quantities. There are places like Severn Trent in Yorkshire that are getting huge fines, and quite rightly so. I want to support this motion and make sure that everywhere has clean beaches like we have in North Tyneside. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to refer to the comments which Councillor Newman made with regard to the nationalised water industry in the past. I think he is viewing this with distinctly rose-tinted spectacles. When the water industry was nationalised, it had a disastrous economic record right across the country, and standards have undoubtedly risen since privatisation. When it was nationalised, our rivers and beaches were badly polluted and we had an appalling reputation within Europe. Since privatisation, there's been £160 billion of investment, and I think it's probably more than that now, but huge sums of investment in improving the infrastructure, which has benefited everybody. In the first decade after privatisation, investment was doubled compared with what the industry got when it was state-owned. No government was prepared to put money into proper investment to improve the infrastructure, but the privatisation ensured that that happened. And when it was state-owned, bills rose far faster than the rate of inflation, whereas now, in real terms, they have actually declined. So I think we've got to acknowledge the good work that has been done under privatisation. That said, I do agree that the practice of discharging sewage into waterways should cease, but I think that there has to be a proper timescale for that to happen. Presumably, were there to be an instant ban, we would see sewage coming back up into people's houses and into our streets, and none of us can possibly want to consider that. So there has to be a proper timescale for that. And one of the things I think should happen, which I understand is under consideration, is that the water company should be statutory consultees on all planning applications, whether it's residential or industrial applications. Because, of course, if there is extra building of whatever sort, the water companies then have to deal with the requirements for water in those new areas, and it's important, therefore, that they should have a full and proper part in the consideration. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Councillor McMullen.
Yeah, I just want to bring everyone's attention that we are asking for people to use profits to invest in infrastructure, which in the last motion we accused that we wouldn't understand what would happen if we took profits away to do other things. But quite clearly, if you leave them with profits, infrastructure doesn't necessarily appear. So it's quite good that we actually commend that happens, and the site does actually understand infrastructure can be and should be spent from profits.
Thank you, Councillor McMullen. Councillor Mulvena?
I think what also needs to be considered is if we're actually discharging it into the sea, it's killing plants in the sea. And if you look at the National Geographic channel, for example, it had a thing on the other week where it stated that the sea and the oceans were one of the biggest areas of carbon capture, and what they could capture was way beyond what trees could capture. So it is concerning that we're actually killing off the very source that can help this planet.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll be supporting this motion. I just think it's really important that we keep it on the political agenda. It's almost a year now since this was debated in the House of Commons. It was October 2021 where this became a big hot potato issue. The Environment Bill was passing through at that time. An amendment had been proposed that would have dealt with this issue then, and Conservative MPs voted against that amendment, and so, pardon the pun, watered it down. So we're left where we are, but it's right that we should be supporting this tonight because we've got to keep it on the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Newman, would you like to express the right to reply?
Thank you, Chair. Very quickly. Councillor Wallace, I believe I was 4 when the water companies were privatised. I think technology infrastructure has moved on quite a lot from there. I didn't want to make this a motion around my belief of privatised water company. I wanted to highlight the fact that I was trying to leave politics out of it. My belief that when you look at the profit side of things, and I know you've mentioned profit, they're still making billions per year. And if you look at the current projections, by 2030, the government says that they want to reduce 44,000 spills. So if we have an average of 400,000 discharges per year, 400,000 discharges per year, by 2030 they want to reduce that by about 44,000. By 2040 they want to reduce it by 160,000, and by 2050, which is where the target ends, they want to reduce it by 320,000, which still leaves on an average of about 80,000 discharges per year. What I'm pointing out is that if we're putting this investment to stop 320,000 discharges, why can't we put some of that £2 billion of profit per year to get rid of all of it? I'm not saying it should be immediate. I'm not saying we should have an immediate ban. It will take detailed negotiation, and it will take a lot of negotiations between the water companies and the government. But I think given that the government's own projections say that they could reduce it by 320,000 discharges, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to ask them to do a total ban, considering how much they think they can on the current plan. So I think we've kind of got a consensus, and I hope we'll all vote in favour of it, so I'm going to leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. We'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Any against? Yep. That's unanimous. 63?
52.
52. Thank you. We'll now move on to motion 5. Can I invite Councillor Carl Johnson to move the motion, please?
Thank you, Chair. Almost 2 in 5, 38% of children in the North East live in poverty. This rises to almost half, 47% of children living with a household under 5. Both are now the highest rates of any UK nation or region, with the North East experiencing by far the steepest increase in child poverty in the country in recent years. The gap between the living standards of children in the region compared to UK average has reached a 20-year high. And this is part of a clear trajectory that began around 2014-15, well before the COVID-19 pandemic and the cost of living crisis. Shelf poverty in the North East is not inevitable. It's a political choice of the Conservative government. Over the past 12 years of Tory rule, we've seen consistently bad policies which further condemn the children of our region. Not a single one of our towns was given funding from the Towns Fund, while 39 out of 45 towns happen to be Conservative constituencies, placing us in Tier 2 for the Levelling Up Fund, meaning we are at a disadvantage when it comes to bidding, with our score being capped at 75%, while Tier 1 areas like the former Chancellor's Leafy Richmond constituency get to go into Tier 1. The Council did a £20 uplift in universal credit, which was a lifeline to struggling families. The refusal to ban zero-hour contracts or the failure to provide adequate funding to upskill the workforce, coupled with the low-growth economy the Conservatives created, have seen in-work poverty explode, as wages see real terms cuts at the same time as the government seemingly incapable of tackling inflation, which has further hidden the value of wages. We now see some gimmicky measures from the new Prime Minister. The first one will not benefit working people at all, but will benefit the richest. National insurance being cut is something you can do in the good times, when you've got lots of money available, not when you're scraping around for money like they have at the moment. The poorest 10% gave an average of £11.50 this year, while the top 10% will get 60 times that from the national insurance cut. The top 5% gained twice as many pounds as the entire bottom half in terms of income distribution. Furthermore, the latest proposal from the government on universal credit will see those poorest families in work suffer either having the benefits cut or forced to give up work because they simply can't work any more hours and continue to provide the care they currently do unpaid. The government needs a whole rethink on child poverty, and reality situation is that the only thing that will reduce the level of child poverty in this region is a Labour government. We've been let down by the government on Levelling Up, and everyone in this chamber should vote for this motion to allow us to send a cross-party message to the government that North Shields and Wallsend need their support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to second this motion?
I do, yes, and I'd like to take the opportunity to speak to the motion as well.
That's fine.
Thank you. As prominent riverside historic towns, North Shields and Wallsend have witnessed the tides of their fortune coming in and going out many times, and the great ingenuity and rich resources of our borough have made a huge contribution to Britain's prosperity over many generations. The people of North Tyneside rightly take pride in that heritage. They want to continue to make an important contribution to the nation's economic growth. In order to do that, they need to be starting out on equal terms to the rest of the country, rather than continually working from a position of disadvantage. The structural imbalances that have taken root in Britain's economy are well documented, so much so that the now deposed ex-Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, felt his party needed to finally confront that issue. And being so fond of a catchphrase, he coined one to describe a proposed remedy, levelling up. Sadly, perhaps predictably, his rhetoric didn't match reality. Time and again, we sought to access levelling up funding for local schemes that would have made a real difference to the lives of our residents. And on what basis were our bids refused? According to the House of Commons Public Accounts Committee, who reported on this issue in May of this year, the principles for awarding funding were only finalised by ministers after they knew who, from the 170 shortlisted bidders, would win and who would not as a result of those principles. Just let that sink in a minute. So they received bids from local authorities, including North Tyneside, took a look at them, devised a scoring system that would determine the winners and the losers. It's breathtaking, isn't it? And so in light of this, and given that we have a new Prime Minister, who we can only hope oversees a more transparent and even-handed regime of ministerial decision-making, we need to make it plain to Westminster that investing in the people and prosperity of our riverside towns is a priority that cannot be ignored and should be taken seriously. And so I hope all members in this chamber will support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Westwater.
Thank you. I'm speaking to support this motion. We must take the child poverty out of the big, difficult box that it's in and come up with a big, bold plan to try and fix it. The motion asks the elected mayor to write to the Prime Minister urging action on child poverty in the North East. And yes, I agree. I want to know exactly what the government's plans are for trying to alleviate and tackle child poverty in this borough. I think it's only fair to state that the party opposite doesn't have a monopoly on insight into the poverty that some level of children face. I've been a previous school governor at Churchill Community College and saw on a regular basis the pressures on the school's catchment area. I was also a founding member of Angels of the North charity, which helped disadvantaged families and children in this borough. We worked hand in hand with the Reverend Alan Dickinson and the Bay Food Bank, and we provided the warehouse and community distribution centre at our premises on North Tyne Industrial Estate. This charitable work has resulted in the charity being awarded the Whitley Bay Town Cup. I have respect for all members in this chamber, whatever their political persuasion, either left or right, and I do think that there is not a single one of us who does not care passionately about the welfare of disadvantaged children in this borough. We are all hurt by the idea that young people are struggling, and this may be part of my Presbyterian upbringing. So to try and solve the problem, we'll have to work together. So yes, Mayor Redfern, send your letter to the Prime Minister and let us all have the reply as soon as possible. In relation to the second point of the motion, every member in this chamber wants to see increased levelling up funds into this borough. Funding that will improve the quality of life of our residents and taxpayers, who we are all here elected to represent, deserve that we fight on their behalf to have a better borough. And I fully support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Westwater. Councillor Frank Lott.
Thank you, Chair. And can I take this, my first opportunity, to congratulate you and your deputy on your election to your respective positions. And also to Councillor George Westwater on his election as leader of the Conservative Party. George is a good man, and I hope to see the benefit of his work sometime soon. Whilst I acknowledge that this region has benefited from public money made available by the government, and much of our recent and current regeneration initiatives bear testimony to this, not least in Whitley Bay, North Shields and Wallsend, I'm supporting this motion simply because it's asking for fair treatment. The fact that the South East of England received twice as much from the Levelling Up Fund as our region exposes levelling up to be just another vacuous, misleading Tory platitude along similar lines to oven-ready deal. All COVID regulations were adhered to during the parties, and the best one of all, that beautifully oxymoronic phrase, Brexit opportunities. But then, as this motion states, that the government rejected North Tyneside's bids for levelling up and the Towns Fund, and as has been mentioned previously, it did, however, allocate Towns Fund money to leafy and affluent Richmond. This government also rejected the combined Weir and Tyne Freeport bid in favour of the Teesside application, even though our bid scored higher on the government's own criteria than the Teesside bid did. And mind what a sorry state that is now in, with Tees Works now being 90% owned by two private individuals, who in the first 5 months of the last financial year were paid themselves dividends totalling 8.7 million. Now, so as not to be critical of someone not here to defend themselves, can I simply add that one of those businessmen did not give £7,000 to Mayor Houchen's campaign fund for his last election. Now, the only democratic control that can be exercised over T-Sport now is it rests with the Planning Committee of Redcar and Cleveland Council. And now that we've got a new Prime Minister, there are fears that this slender control will be even more diminished following her promised bonfire of the regulations. So I'm asking too much when I ask not only for fairness, but also the retention of local democratic involvement and oversight in developing the potential of areas like ours. This will be crucial if the government announces tomorrow, as is strongly rumoured, the establishment of 40 investment zones, which are believed to be at the heart of the new Prime Minister's new vision for levelling up. Investment zones failed under David Cameron. Sorry, am I allowed to say that under your statement before, that we can't have personal attacks? Because if that's the case, then I won't say that if David Cameron had a constant feature in his government of failure.
No, I wouldn't advise you to say it, Councillor.
Right, look, thank you. But they can succeed. They can succeed if there is greater involvement of the relevant local authorities. Now, the time is right now for transformational opportunities to come our way, and for government ministers like Simon Clarke to cast his eyes and his funds to the areas north of Middlesbrough and Cleveland. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lott. Councillor Bones?
Thank you, Chair. This motion has two simple asks, both of which are admirable. To take more action to tackle child poverty, something we are all in favour of, and to bring more government investment into North Tyneside, which we are also, of course, in favour of. I would, however, point out that the government's Levelling Up Fund hasn't taken an active decision not to give North Tyneside money, but simply that the bids which were produced by this Labour administration did not meet the required standard to secure funding. This should give the Mayor food for thought when putting together bids like this. It's no wonder that Teesside, as Councillor Lott just alluded to, under the incredible leadership of Ben Houchen, has had such successes in these funding bids. Ben has a clear plan to grow his local economy and boost local industry, something that's unfortunately absent under this Mayor. We will support this motion, but politely request that the Mayor ensures future bids from this authority meet relevant criteria, are sensible and fit as part of a long-term plan. Maybe then her administration could be half as successful as Ben Houchen's.
Thank you, Councillor Bones. Councillor Thurloway?
Thank you, Chair. Since the elected Mayor first won in 2013, Wallsend has seen a slow but steady regeneration, despite more than a decade of austerity imposed on this council by central government, a devastating pandemic, and now a cost of living crisis. The elected Mayor in this council, this Labour council, remains committed to the people of Wallsend, and we remain committed to all of North Tyneside and not just areas at the coast. It's a disgrace that North Tyneside is ignored by the Conservatives in London. Boris Johnson spent his time in office throwing money at red wall seats in order to shore up his majority in time for the next election. At one of our previous meetings, a Conservative councillor suggested that this council should act more like Tees Valley Combined Authority. A very dangerous proposal, in my opinion. My own suggestion is that central government should stop playing politics with people's lives and people's services. Under Boris Johnson, we had a government that was more interested in pork barrel politics than helping people. Hopefully, the new Prime Minister will take levelling up seriously, an opportunity to rebalance the economy away from London and the South, reduce regional inequality, and start tackling poverty in the North East. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thurloway. Councillor Rankin?
I had not put my hand up, Chair.
Sorry?
I hadn't put my hand up.
Okay. Councillor Graham?
Thank you, Chair. Just in this debate, I would like to bring attention to the excellent research published yesterday by Amanda Bailey from the North East Child Poverty Commission, which highlighted a growing chasm between the government's declarations on levelling up and the reality of rising child poverty in the North East. The study comes just a few months after a national report found that child poverty had risen steadily in the North East over the last 7 years, and last year went against a national trend to become the highest in the country. That is a scourge on all of us. It is a disgrace. And to have members opposite laughing at what I'm saying is very disrespectful. Please behave.
Point of order, Chair. No one was laughing. I think that's just my face, Councillor.
I'm not having chit-chat across. If you want to say anything, speak to me. Have you finished, Councillor Graham? Thank you. Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Chair. To begin with, I thought I was going to say something. Then after Councillor Westwater spoke, I thought, well, actually, I don't need to say anything because I think we kind of agree. And then after the last speaker, I feel like I have to, because we talk about the levelling up. What is levelling up? That term, I mean, to steal what Councillor Wilson said, the phrase, the catchphrase, levelling up, what is it? It gives you the image of taking money and giving it to areas where they really need it in order to make society fairer. That's the image you get. Yet, according to The Guardian, the southeast of England, which is the most affluent region in Britain outside of London, received £9.2 million of funding, yet the northeast got £4.9 million worth of funding. All right, okay, well, maybe somebody did some paperwork wrong. I know what I think, but it doesn't seem right. Then we have to look at what Rishi Sunak actually said, which has been reported. And Rishi Sunak said, and this was Royal Tunbridge Wells when he said it, I believe, that we managed to start changing the funding formulas to make sure areas like this, Royal Tunbridge Wells, got the funding they deserved because we inherited a bunch of formulas from Labour that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas, and it needed to be undone. So we have a catchphrase, levelling up. We have the most affluent area in the country getting nearly double the money of one of the most poorest regions in the country. So there seems to be a bit of an issue here. And it's not good enough just to have a go at Rishi Sunak over this, because there seems to be a problem in government. And I honestly believe there's a big problem here, because we just have to look at Robert Jenrick, which I believe I'm saying that right. He was the secretary, and he admitted that he and a junior minister approved payments in each other's towns, in each other's constituencies. So we have another government minister admitting that they deliberately put funding into each other's constituencies. This starts to look a bit like, it doesn't look right. I don't know about the rest of you, but it doesn't seem that we're getting a fair hearing, and it doesn't seem that we're getting a fair deal based upon the history of the Levelling Up Fund. It starts to look a bit like nepotism and patronage, and it just doesn't seem fair. And I'm sorry, Councillor Westwater, I'm really glad that you came out and said that you want to speak in favour, because I honestly thought we could put this issue to bed and have consensus, and then we hear another political attack. And I don't know about the rest of you. Is anybody else annoyed that sometimes we have an issue where we both have to speak together, where we could put party politics aside, and it descends into this pointless mudslinging match? Can we just put it to bed, vote in favour of it, and tell the government it needs to change? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. Councillor Early.
Thank you, Chair. I was very pleased to hear what Councillor Westwater had to say, but I think it bears reminding for all councillor members that in 2020, I believe, I brought a motion on child poverty, which was based on data then that came out of the North East Child Poverty Commission, and I'm not including Councillor Westwater in this, or indeed any of the Conservative group who weren't then elected members, but certainly several of the Conservative group attacked that motion and said the figures were inaccurate. The predictions about the growth in child poverty were inaccurate, and in some respects they were, because it's worse than was predicted now. So I'm glad to see that there has been, under the new Conservative group, a change in approach on the issue of child poverty. The other point I wanted to make is just to respond to Councillor Bowen's suggestion that the bids for levelling up funding from North Tyneside weren't up to scratch, didn't meet the criteria, and that was the reason that we failed. I think, as Councillor Wilson said when speaking on the motion, those criteria were only developed after the bids had come in. So it's a bit like respectively judging the bids on the basis of criteria that you've invented to give the money to those people that you want to give to, who by and large, are your political associates.
Thank you, Councillor Early. Councillor Cruddas?
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I'm very heartened to hear that there's cross-party support for the motion. It's just a reminder, I feel, that we're talking about investments, money, areas and the politics around that. I just want to bring it down to children growing up in poverty, families living in poverty, adults. It's proven the social conditions in which people live directly affect their health. People grow older in poorer health who are poor. They die younger, depending on the area. That can be around 10 years, actually more if you look at some of the more deprived areas in North Tyneside compared to the leafy suburbs of the southeast and London. And really, it doesn't have to be like that. It's policy, and this Conservative government are continuing to make those decisions knowing full well of the facts, and I think we really need to address that. So I think it's great that there's cross-party support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cruddas. Councillor Scargill?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with both requests of the motion. I'll be supporting it. But I think it's a real shame that this council doesn't seem to be able to agree a motion unless it just bashes national government. We did submit a motion on increasing the accountability of council and committee meetings. It wasn't accepted. I know our residents will be very disappointed if they could see these meetings. Regardless, funding for North Shields and Wallsend, tackling child poverty, is something we can all agree on. So I will support this motion despite the constant government bashing that everyone's sick of. Thank you.
Scargill. Councillor Rankin?
Thank you, Chair. There's quite a lot of bashing of the administration here as well. I'm quite surprised that some of the comparisons to say that we should be more like Teesside, but if that's the case, what the party opposite is saying is that we should buy a hugely loss-making airport for £40 million. We should sink £10 million into the site and then underwrite £25 million of operating losses over 2 years, which that's effectively what the Mayor has done down there so far. So I would like to think that our business cases are far stronger than that.
Rankin. Mayor Redfern?
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to thank our officers for the bids they have written. Right, all the regeneration work that's gone on in this borough has come from outside sources, not from the government. It's come from lottery funding, English heritage, good business cases going to the Combined Authority. So well done to our officers. Thank you so much.
Can I now invite the mover of the motion to exercise the right of reply, Councillor Carl Johnson?
Thank you, Chair. I'll talk Councillor Bones through very slowly, because I do talk quickly sometimes, so I'll go very slowly through the criteria and how bids are assessed. If you'd listened to my opening speech, I would have said that because of his government placing North Tyneside in Tier 2 for levelling up funding, our bid is capped at scoring at 75%. So even if our bid actually scored 100%, the maximum we could possibly get is 75% because of choosing to put us in Tier 2 and put our areas as a bigger priority than North Tyneside. If a Tier 1 area scores 76%, but we've scored 100%, they get the money, we don't. That is what the government has done for North Tyneside, no matter how good our bids are, and some of our bids have been absolutely fantastic, and these two bids that we've put in are absolutely fantastic and should give the funding to North Shields and Wallsend. No matter how good our bids are, your government has hamstrung us against stopped our ability to try and get this fund. Our bids have scored highly consistently, but the government have put North Tyneside in Tier 2, meaning we can score a maximum of 75%. No matter how good our bid is, if other bids, average bids, 75, 76, 77% from Tier 1 authorities, they would get money over North Tyneside because that is what the government is choosing to do to us. And Councillor Scargill's complained about a motion not brought to Council tonight. If he learns to write motions properly that within the rules will get accepted every single time, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. We'll now go to the vote. Those in favour of the motion? Thank you. Any against? No. Thank you. "51 votes for the motion, and no votes against. The motion is passed. We now move on to item 5, Audit Committee. Can I ask Councillor Martin Rankin to move the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. This report requests Council to approve the appointment of Malcolm Wilkinson, the existing Deputy Chair of the Audit Committee, as the Chair of the Audit Committee following the resignation of the previous Chair, and also to approve the appointment of Dr Stuart Green as the replacement co-opted member of the Audit Committee and Deputy Chair. I would ask Council to move the recommendations and agree in section 1.2 of the report.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Do you have a seconder? Thank
Second
you.
row, Chair.
Are there any? Agreed. We now go to the vote. Those in favour? Are there any against? No. Thank you. Item 6. Request for dispensation pursuant to Section 85 of the Local Government Act 1972. Can I ask Carl Johnson to move the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I will start with saying I know there's been lots of politics said in this chamber tonight, but I do hope this motion will go through with unanimous support right across the chamber. As members of this chamber know, Councillor Muriel Green is one of 3 councillors in Wheatslade Ward. Councillor Green is a long-serving and dedicated elected member. She has served North Tyneside Council and resident diligently over many years. As set in the report, sadly, Councillor Green has had a period of ill health. This prevented her attending meetings at the authority in recent weeks. The authority is able to approve a period of non-attendance for an elected member where there are good reasons. Such approval must be given by the council. This approval must be sought for a period of 6 months since the last meeting attended by the member and ensures that members do not vacate office because they have been able to attend a meeting. The report before this evening makes clear that there are very good reasons for Councillor Green not to be here on medical grounds. We therefore should agree dispensation for Councillor Green. This will mean that the legislation described in the report is complied with and that Councillor Green does not cease to be a North Tyneside councillor. I would therefore ask that Council agrees to recommendations set out in the report and that we all send our best wishes from the chamber to Councillor Green.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Do you have a seconder?
I second that, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Redfern. I'll now invite members to speak to the motion. No? Can I now invite the mover of the motion to move the right reply? No. We'll go straight to the vote. Those in favour? Thank you. None against? No. Thank you. The motion is carried. Same vote, isn't it? 46 for the motion. Now move on to item 7, which I believe is my announcements. I'll be quick. I'm looking at the time. Following the sad announcement of the Queen's death, I had the honour and privilege of accompanying the elected mayor to the regional proclamation of accession, which was read by the High Sheriff David Bavard at Newcastle Law Courts. Later in the day, the elected mayor read the proclamation at the Quadrant. As you can imagine, a great deal of preparation was required when the announcement of the Queen's death was made. And I would like to express my thanks to all council staff who were involved. Under the leadership of the Chief Executive, they worked tirelessly and willingly all weekend to ensure that all protocols were strictly adhered to and that residents were kept fully informed as to where to lay flowers, sign the books of condolence, and being invited to events. This was all done very successfully, so well done to all of you. On Sunday the 18th, I attended the service of commemoration and thanksgiving at Christchurch. It was a beautiful and moving ceremony with wonderful singing by the Killingworth Choir. In August, I attended a service again at Christchurch celebrating Superintendent Peter Day's 30 years of service to the Fishermen's Mission, a remarkable achievement. In July, along with the elected mayor and my consort Linda Dark, we attended a performance at Whitley Bay Playhouse by the True Colours Theatre, which is of course my charity. It was a joyous and uplifting occasion. It was heartwarming to see these young disabled people putting so much effort into it and looking so happy. I have to say, we were all emotional wrecks. I've also attended citizenship ceremonies, which I always enjoy. I did have to take some time off because of COVID, and thank you to those who stepped in to help. Thank you. Is the end of the meeting, I believe. So, I do beg your pardon, Mayor Redford. That's me, sir.
I would just like to thank the staff for all they've done under tremendous sort of pressure and sort of difficult times in the last few weeks. Thank you so much.